Since the dawn of civilization, humankind has been haunted by tales of creatures lurking in the dark, thirsting for life. Vampires, these immortal, bloodthirsty beings, are among the most persistent myths in human history. But where did they come from? And why do they continue to captivate our imaginations? Our journey begins thousands of years ago, in the cradle of civilization. The earliest hints of vampire-like beings can be found in Mesopotamian mythology. Here tales of Lilith or Lilith surfaced. She was an ancient demoness who defied divine rules and became a night-wandering spirit, preying upon men and children. To the Mesopotamians, Lilith embodied both feminine power and unrestrained danger. Her myth evolved, becoming a warning against the unknown forces of the night. But Lilith was just one of many. In ancient Greece, the Lamia, a female figure who seduced men and drank their blood, haunted dark forests. Her name alone inspired fear, cautioning the Greeks against the allure of beauty that could mask lethal intent. Empuse, shape-shifting women with a single, gleaming leg of brass, were also said to lure young men to their doom, feeding on their vitality to sustain their unnatural existence. Each of these figures captured primal fears of death, seduction, and the loss of control. But it was in the heart of Eastern Europe that the vampire we recognize today began to take shape. In Slavic folklore, tales of the Uper or Nosferatu became widely feared. These creatures were not glamorous, they were horrifying and grotesque, bloated with the blood of the living. The Slavs believed that those who had committed evil deeds in life, or those who died unnatural deaths, might rise from their graves as vampires. They would return to drain the life from their families, spreading sickness, death, and despair. To protect themselves, villagers took extreme measures. Corpses were staked, decapitated, or buried with garlic in their mouths. Iron objects or scythes were sometimes placed across bodies, meant to slice the creature if it attempted to rise. These rituals blended Christian and pre-Christian beliefs, showing how deeply vampire lore was rooted in local customs and anxieties. As the Middle Ages dawned, Europe was rife with superstition. Plagues, famine, and illness were common, and the idea of supernatural forces responsible for these misfortunes took hold. Vampires, or revenants, were often blamed for unexplained deaths and illness, stoking fear in already vulnerable communities. The Catholic Church's influence played a central role. Priests would lead rituals to exorcise graves or cleanse villages suspected of vampire infestation. In some cases, entire communities gathered to perform protective rituals, a reflection of how deeply intertwined religion, superstition, and fear had become. In the age of faith and superstition, vampires were not only creatures of horror, but symbols of religious and moral decay, a constant reminder of the dangers lurking in the dark. In the 19th century, the vampire legend evolved once again, taking on a new form in literature. Inspired by the Gothic craze, authors began to write stories that merged horror and romance. In 1819, John Polidori's The Vampire was published, introducing the vampire as a charismatic figure, not just a ghoul, but an aristocrat. But it was Bram Stoker's Dracula, published in 1897, that defined the vampire we know today. Stoker drew from Slavic folklore, historical figures like Vlad the Impaler, and Victorian fears of disease and invasion. Dracula became the prototype, a seductive yet terrifying nobleman who preyed on innocents. The character of Dracula bridged folklore with Gothic fiction, creating a creature that was both alluring and repellent. This novel set the stage for countless adaptations, making the vampire a fixture in Western culture. In the 20th century, vampires found new life in cinema. F.W. Murnau's Nosferatu in 1922 terrified audiences, its haunting visuals forever engraving the vampire's elongated form into the minds of moviegoers. Bela Lugosi's portrayal of Dracula in 1931 then cemented the vampire as both seductive and dangerous. Over the years, the vampire evolved alongside societal values. Vampires became metaphors for forbidden desire, teenage angst, and the complex nature of humanity itself. Shows like Buffy the Vampire Slayer and True Blood continued to explore the vampire's duality, representing both our fears and our deepest desires. In recent decades, vampires have continued to evolve, reflecting modern concerns and tastes. Anne Rice's The Vampire Chronicles introduced a more introspective, morally ambiguous vampire, while Stephen E. Meyer's Twilight series reimagined vampires as supernatural romantics. Today's vampires grapple with identity, ethics, and their place in society. They are no longer purely villains. They're complex, sometimes sympathetic characters who wrestle with their own monstrous nature. And so the vampire endures, morphing through centuries of myth, folklore, and popular culture. They are creatures of duality, caught between life and death, desire and dread, darkness and light.